Welcome to Cultivated Live for Monday, April 15th. It's tax day, so happy Monday, I guess. I'm Jay Rosenthal, co-founder of Cultivated Media and host of this show, Cultivated Live. And since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, and useful information. We do that in two key ways. One, through our daily newsletter at Cultivated Daily. And there's a link to today's newsletter in the show notes, but also how to subscribe, and through this daily live stream, which we call Cultivated Live. And if you're watching on LinkedIn, that's great. Please do follow us there. If you're watching on YouTube, smash the subscribe button. That is how you help us do our work better. In a few moments, I'm going to bring up Ben Sheridan and Matt Greenberg from Platform Cannabis Advisors to talk about their business, their approach, their success, and importantly, what is happening in New York cannabis. But before that, let's get to what is driving the cannabis industry today. Let's go to New Hampshire. A bill passed last week by the New Hampshire House of Representatives, which is now being considered in the state Senate. It's facing the prospect of both being vetoed by Governor Chris Sununu if it's not altered by the state Senate. Now, New Hampshire, you may know, is the lone New England state that has not legalized. It's really one of the only holdouts in the entire Northeast that doesn't have legal cannabis. Last month, we hosted one of the co-sponsors of the bill in early March, State Representative Anita Burrows, who said, we're seeing a conga line of cars going over the border every day to get product. So the race is on to get it legal in New Hampshire. Now, other Republican governors like Virginia Glenn Youngkin have vetoed legislature-passed legalization bills in recent weeks, as well as the Republican governor of Florida saying he advises people to vote against the measure in November in Florida. But here's what's happening now. The chief architect of the bill, Republican Representative Erica Lane, pushed back on the governor's office after the bill passed the House, saying this, and this is a big shot across the same party governor, the bill that passed the House reflects the governor's guidelines as I understood them until his last-minute embrace of a franchise model. I made dozens of attempts to meet with the governor and his staff to get into the policy details, but the best meeting I achieved was a walk and talk with him through the halls of the Capitol. Aside from the fact that I do love walk and talks, and it's very Aaron Sorkin of her to say that, if changes are made that would garner the governor's signature, then New Hampshire could be added to the list of legal states. If not, expect it to be kicked further down the road, perhaps an entire another year. On tomorrow's Cultivated Live on LinkedIn and YouTube, we'll host the leaders from New Hampshire, the cannabis industry, and the legislators working on the legalization bill. Follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to YouTube so you don't miss it at 10 a.m. Eastern. Here's what else. Top congressional officials told Political, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Financial Services Chair Representative Patrick McHenry, and Representative Maxine Waters, that they met last week to discuss attaching the Safer Banking Act and stablecoin legislation to the Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization bill, which absolutely needs to pass before May 10th. So the machinations of what's happening in D.C. are going to be interesting to follow over the next several weeks. About 100 cannabis companies, both plant touching and ancillary, are apparently under investigation for taking COVID relief funds during the pandemic, according to a story in Marijuana Moment. Michiganders, for their part, continue to have a seemingly insatiable appetite for cannabis, another record sales month in March. It'll be interesting to watch, and this is important, we talked about it before, what Ohio's adult use market's impact on Michigan sales happens certainly along those border stores, which are super high performing in Michigan. Vangst, who released their 2023 jobs report last week, which we talked about, announced their acquisition of Cannabis Temp, the temp staffing division of Cannabis Team. That was last week, so kudos to Cannabis Temp and Vangst. And the real estate site Real Estate Witch partnered with Leafly to come up with the best weed cities in America list again this year. And there are loads of criteria, but only one top spot, which goes to Denver, Colorado. I would say it's hard to argue with that, but we know lots of cannabis folks will do just that and argue that Denver isn't the best weed town in the country. Okay, now it is time to bring up our guests. Give me 1 second. I have to do the fancy behind the scenes. There we go. Let me move everybody over in the right space. There we are. I have with us Ben Sheridan and Matt Greenberg from Platform Cannabis Advisors. Ben and Matt, welcome.
Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for having us
this morning.
How'd I do so far? Pretty good?
Pretty good.
Excellent. I'm excited. I'm excited to tune in again, regularly. This has been super informative. Great way to start Monday morning.
I think so too. You can start every morning this way.
Yeah, although I will say we might disagree a little bit with the characterization of Denver as the #1 weed city in the country. I will say that I think New York has a little bit there that will tout here.
I'm an East Coast guy too, and I agree with you, but I don't want to run afoul of everybody in Denver, and I don't want to run afoul of anybody in LA or places in Michigan, which sell a lot of cannabis too, or people in DC. Believe DC is a great cannabis home. Maybe we'll have to take a tour of them all, the top 10, and like actually do a deep dive and see. That sounds like important work we should do over the summer. Ben and Matt, you are from Platform Cannabis Advisors. Ben, give us the elevator pitch because, and then we'll get into more of your background. But give us the elevator pitch about what you guys are doing, and I guess even how it's going.
Absolutely. Again, thanks for having us on this morning. I'm Ben Sheridan, co-founder and CEO of Platform Cannabis Advisors and PCA. What we do is we aim to get retailers open efficiently, profitably, and sustainably. We aim and take target and solve that upfront cash flow challenge that we see in particular here in New York State in real estate and financing and advisory services. And we do it while helping our clients maintain their equity. And so far, I'm really proud to say it's been going great. We launched our first store on April 1st here on the Upper West Side of Manhattan on 66th Street between Columbus and Central Park West. And client number one, Flower Power Dispensers, as you could see, both my partner and Platform CFO, Matt, and I repping today, got open in about 4.5 weeks. Real hats off to our licensee and partner, Angelo, who's an electrician by trade, but he did it for under $250,000, took on no interest-bearing debt from Platform Cannabis Advisors, and he did it while maintaining 100% of his equity. So that this prototype is exciting, and we're really thrilled to have this store open and to try and do it again now.
Well, you just said a lot of things in that one sentence, which seemed to set certainly that store apart, but even maybe how you work with them. There were 4 weeks, the money part, the opening part, that's also rare, sometimes hard, but also the location, and it's springtime in Manhattan. It must be a good couple of weeks for Flower Power, and going into a very, very busy week and weekend. It's no time like the present, I guess. Matt, to you, give us a little bit of a background about you and Ben, and sort of what prompted sort of starting Platform in the first place.
Sure. So, my background is really a finance background. I came out of the hedge fund sector, was at Navy Capital for a period of time when Canada was launching in 2018. So really kind of got a firsthand seat to the bubble that Canada was and everything related to kind of the early LP days. Went from there, started a company called East Hill Capital, which was investing as well in the cannabis sector. Ran that for a few years, did some work as an outsourced consultant, kind of a startup outsourced CFO for small companies. And then I met Ben at a wedding, and he convinced me to come over to OCM. And at OCM was really kind of played a bit of a chief economist role for a period of time until John Kagia got there, really helped to craft the economic framework that New York is. Really had a great experience in kind of learning what the MRTA really wanted the industry to look like, what the goals were, and trying to help the industry kind of meet those goals in a way where investors could get a return, companies could get started with capital and find financing, which a lot of states were having those issues with. And at the same time, look at a measured rollout that didn't, flood the market from day one in any capacity, and was supposed to be, an aligned rollout between the cultivators and the retailers, if not for a whole bunch of, things that happened in between. So that was that. Ben and I left to start Platform. I left in August, he left in September, and really with a vision to try to help a lot of the issues that we were seeing in the market, a lot of the things that are well sort of documented issues that licensees have been having in getting that startup capital and getting off the ground. Ben and I saw an opportunity to come up with a creative solution there and kind of help solve that problem.
Yeah, and it seems to be working. I mean, it hasn't been that long. It's you start August and September, but Ben, talk a little bit about your background too, because I think it would be interesting to sort of lay the groundwork for sort of how you operate it and your lens and view of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So came to the OCM already from within government, having served with a previous governor's administration. So that was kind of one of the foundations, but have been around the startup advocacy, social enterprise, nonprofit space for about a decade, and spent a bunch of time on political campaigns too. And there's a lot of similarities of kind of starting up from scratch, a real, bootstrap operation and bringing something to life that's tangible and, reaching people and really working with people from, diverse backgrounds and taking a lot of the values that, for me personally have been important throughout my career, to and through OCM, one of those being like focusing on social justice. That for me was the prism to get into cannabis in the first place. Like what an incredible vehicle to, really help repair a damaged world and bring more people, to prosperity. And, you read the MRTA and you're like, they don't write laws like that anymore. Come on. Like that's, wow, what a blessing, what a privilege to be able to enact this. And, not everyone loves the framework, but who are those people and, and who's being benefited by the framework? There are 13 cultivators in the state of New Jersey. That's exciting for them. But that doesn't really help anybody. The legislature did it twice in a way. They gave the MRTA and then they said, here's the conditional cultivators, bang, bang, get it started. And, they planted the seeds for card very early on as well. So just, hats off to the leadership in the state of New York from, the speaker, to, Chris Alexander, for really forging that pathway forward and, to the governor's office, really for a long time, supporting the program, to get it off the ground on day one and now leaned back in a meaningful way. But, there's just a ton of excitement around where the state is going. What is it? 10 dispensaries opening a week. I mean, just, the momentum. You speak to the picks and shovels parts of the community. You speak to the licensees that are opening. You speak to the processors, the brands, the cultivators, and they're busy. And yeah, there's a backlog and certain things are moving slower, but, it's a small office. They're working overtime there. And, there's a really exciting future ahead of New York with a lot more players than your average cannabis industry. That's good news.
Matt, maybe I can ask you, talk a bit about a sort of platform specifically, because it does seem like a different approach than other advisories, other regulatory consultants, other people helping others get off the ground and get up and running. What are the key sort of differentiating points how you operate with, Flower Power for this in this example, but others moving forward as well?
Sure. Yeah. So, I can get into the nuances of the business model. I think it'll confuse some people. So I'm going to, talk more high level as to how it sort of plays down.
It's like a Michael Scott in The Office. Talk to me like I'm an 8-year-old. It's good.
Yeah, exactly right. So, I think the biggest differentiating factor, is sort of twofold. One is that we take no equity and no control over the businesses that we're partnering with. We really are betting on the licensee themselves having the ability to operate the dispensary. Sure, with a little bit of help getting up and running, understanding how the SOPs work. But once you get off the ground and you really are a few months into running a business, most of these licensees, kind of our bet is that they're going to be able to do this on their own without, real advisory, without an MSA provider over the top, controlling everything. So the first bet that we're making is that these people will figure it out and we don't need to be there over their shoulder. The second bet that we're making is that we will, in some way, shape, or form, create a portfolio here where you have some winners and some losers. And over time, the collective turns into a really nice return for our investors, for our partners, and for the licensee. And that portfolio approach is something that I haven't seen anybody else, barring a few other players in New York who have started to spin up similar models, which I would say, kind of violate principle one here of no control. But, as sort of this second principle of we're creating a portfolio, we're not going to be controlling equity holders. So we're allowed to do this more than 3 times. And we really just want to be sort of your landlord, understanding that at times, some of you are not going to work out. Some of these businesses aren't going to work out, and we're going to take losses on those. And, we just got back from Unpacked, which was, a great conference from last week. And I heard multiple times on the floor, people say, we can't do a deal unless it's risk-free for us, unless I'm 100% sure that we're going to make money. And, Ben and I are sitting there like, what? You guys are going to miss the boat. because you got to take that risk. And I'm willing, not only do we want to take that risk, in New York, it makes sense to take that risk because the underlying fundamentals of all these businesses are so good right now. And the market is, ramping in a way that is going to keep prices, assuming that there aren't wholesale changes at OCM and wholesale changes to the licensing regime, and everything that we've sort of seen play out from the beginning continues. New York is on a pace right now to have a measured rollout that doesn't need to crash prices in order to get to, sort of a balanced market. And that opportunity for retailers and for, micro businesses and small cultivators and those types of people is immense, because there's always going to be a shelf for them to be on. But the retailers have enough power that they can, drive price to the consumer. They don't have to mark things down. They don't have to be in a race to zero. And eventually, as the illicit market or the unregulated market kind of comes off, we're going to see the legal market and the regulated market really pick up and pick up the slack there. So, we're betting on New York. We're betting on our licensees to be able to run their own stores. And we're doing it in a way that exposes us and our partners to a certain level of risk. But at a portfolio level, we're making the bet that it's going to work out.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And you've seen, Matt, you mentioned that you've been involved, or at least watching, or in the finance side, are the markets like you're talking about Canada. I live in Toronto, and we've seen, we're 5 years beyond this conversation, and we are already at the other end of the cycle, I would say. I would also say at the end of that cycle, we still have, let's say, unregulated stores, listed stores opening up, but it's a much more of a competition, right? And the strong have survived, and the good operators have survived. And I think some are thriving, right? Some of it's based on location, some of it's based on they're really good operators, some of it's based price stabilization. There's more products on the shelves. They've created some unique aspect of why you'd want to go into that retailer versus the other. Can we shift a second? Because often on this show, but also in what we write and also in the news, you guys are based in New York, there's always a focus on what the OCM is doing, clearly. Mm-hmm. And I think, Ben, as you mentioned, the governor's leaning in again, I think is the word you used. What do you expect to happen? I guess the word is that there's been a top-down review. It's underway. What do you expect to happen? Matt, you just mentioned you don't expect wholesale changes to the sort of regulatory environment, but what will happen? And I guess 3, 6, 12 months from now, do we expect, is it still going to be 10 stores opening up a week? What do you expect to have happen? And will we see changes at the margins, or will we see sort of some things really scrapped and restarted? What are your perspectives? And you could both talk to it.
Yeah, I think you'll just continue to see this trajectory of growth and more stores opening. We can speak from firsthand knowledge at this point what it takes to do that. There's this misplaced kind of sense that, let's just license everyone tomorrow, and then the state will have no issues with this cannabis market. And anyone who's tried to open a store will tell you there's a lead time involved with that. And, 4 weeks, because we had a plan in place, and the moment our client found out the location worked, we put a date on the calendar and we didn't move from it. But there was risk associated with that too, but good project management and, moving towards opening, that matters. But on a volume basis, we'll go from 10 stores opening a week to 15 to 20 stores opening a week. And if at the end of the year, New York has somewhere in the, the few hundreds of stores open, is that and they're independently owned, are we really talking about this being a failed market? The people who are calling this a failed market done the research on the other states to call it that, and not to look past the illegal store issue, which is kind of jarring, as someone who grew up in the city that it's gotten this bad. But the New York Times, I think, got it right. The OCM overworked and understaffed. How is OCM solving this issue exactly on their own? Especially in the first 2 years of the law, when the law clearly from day one we saw had certain language in it that left room for these arguments to be made, that the stores could proliferate a little bit. But look at any market, and there are these first few years of kind of figuring it out, because people are gonna try and take advantage of the opportunity that is the first wave. But it's akin to this 1926 mentality. Prohibition's over, and we're in these first few years where we're going to see kind of what people are going to try and get away with. But not a lot of people are drinking bathtub gin in the year 2024 as kind of a strange move, kind of a wrong move. So no, I'm hopeful that there will just be sort of continued growth. And my gut is that, this review will, unveil a truth that, good journalism was able to point to this weekend, which is, incredibly smart and talented group of people at OCM. There aren't enough of them, and they're overworked. And, there need to be government's a team sport. It's going to take more than just the OCM to get this done. It's got to work together at every level to do it. And it takes leadership, and it takes focus and attention. And that's what New York government has historically been able to do and figure out. So this is going to be one of the challenges of this administration. They're going to have to help figure this out.
Yeah. Just so you know, quick pause. Anybody who drops a fish song title in the thing gets a cultivated.news hat. So it's on its way to you, Ben. And for those that don't follow fish, Bathtub Gin is a fish song. It's also a thing. But Matt, I want to ask you, because thinking about the path forward, like I am a would-be retailer in New York. Do I call you and not plead my case, but give you like how do I get in touch with you? What would you tell me if I called?
Yeah, no. So, a couple of points that I'll add to kind of Ben's on that, which lead into your question. I think the first thing that I would say is, when you say, are there going to be wholesale changes? I think the answer is, at this point, with all of the negative press that's been planted on New York, the reaction from legislators and higher ups and whatnot is throw the baby out with the bathwater. Effectively, let's change this whole thing. It's not working. Let's kind of go back to the drawing board completely. And what I think Ben, articulately said, and I will say in a plainer way, is there's a lot of stuff that has worked here. We have more dispensaries than a lot of states have. We have more cultivators than a lot of states have. We are very early in this process, and those people are continuously being added to the ecosystem, and they're getting financed because there aren't massive vertically integrated players who had a tremendous head start and an oligopoly on either the cultivation side or the retail side of this market, which we've seen in a lot of other places. Or both. Right. And, I think New York has created a uniquely capitalistic and competitive market in what is a regulated industry with a licensing scheme. Any licensing scheme, kind of regulatory scheme, is always going to, by nature, have those risks, those oligopolistic risks. And I think New York has, by balancing that, done a really good job. The gut instinct at a government level is going to be expand licensing. Give licensing to all these people who applied in the November or December pools, who have a store and are ready to go. And look, I think number one is a lot of those leases are probably dead at this point, which, Ben, that's kind of Ben's big point coming back, is you can license all these people, but getting a store open is a lot more than just, showing that you have effectively an LOI on a lease or a conditional lease. You really have to go through a process beyond that. And a lot of these guys won't get open. But two is that, by going down the list and rewarding all these people who, in a lot of ways were not prudent with their financial decisions, had no idea whether they were going to get approved for a store, had no clue in any capacity how many people were going to apply for this lottery. If you went out and signed a lease, I personally didn't do that. We told our clients not to do that. We said, if you can't get a conditional lease, don't sign it, because you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get yourself into financial trouble on the back end of that. And I think that's where, the state reaction of let's license 2,000 people who have applied with stores and with leases, it's crazy. You're going to give a lot of people who were not prudent about their financial decisions the opportunity to move forward, and a lot of people who waited and were thinking about this properly, who wanted to think about it from the perspective of, I'm going to get a provisional, then I'm going to go find a location where there isn't anybody, and I'm going to be smart about this. That's really where we think, and that's, leading into your question, Jay, is we want those prudent business owners to come to PCA and say, hey, I've got a provisional license, or I'm applying, I'm in the process of getting granted my license in some capacity. I've got a location that I really like, and we need help. We need someone who can sign our lease, who can guarantee it for us, who can provide us with a loan, who can do all of that without taking equity and control of my business. Where do I go? The answer is we can do that for you. And we can help you get your business started. We can make sure that you're going to get through the process, in a way that is compliant, so that when you go to OCM and you do your check, and we have partners who help you along the way to make sure that you're doing all of that, you can get through this process without any hitches. And, that's really where Angelo was able to, by working with us, take his expertise as an electrician and plug in our back end knowledge of what's going on. And together, we were able to get this dispensary open in 28 days from the day that we took the keys. And I think we can do that again and again and again for people who have that desire to work hard, to work with us at getting things open quickly and efficiently. And then on the back end are willing to, work their butts off to do really well as a small dispensary owner, understanding that you're not going to have the resources of a Housing Works or a Union Square Travel Agency or any of these bigger companies who are out there, with large nonprofits behind them and $1 million a month budgets for all this stuff. That's just not what the average person in New York who's getting a retail license right now has available to them. And we want to give them a different path.
Yeah, I just got it. I must be an idiot because Flower Power, Angela's an electrician. Now I get it. Now I'm down with it. I took me a bit. I'm not as sharp as you guys, but I got it eventually.
His name, not he picked it.
It's good though. Will you be there at 420? Like, is that your home base for 420 this year? On Saturday, you're going to be at Flower Power?
Floating around Central Park, Sheep Meadow, Flower Power. 420 the last few years in New York has really been just awesome. The energy and atmosphere at any, of the parks in New York City is, it's as good as it gets in New York. So we'll be floating around. We'll be wearing our shirts.
Here's hoping for good weather, so everybody's out and about. Ben and Matt, I appreciate you stopping by this morning. Great to hear both your individual stories. I would love to know whose wedding it was, because that sounds like a fortuitous meeting between the two of you, and one that will lead to great success. So I appreciate the time. Look forward to following up sort of as New York continues to evolve and grow. Kudos on your work with Flower Power, which now, of course, I understand. And have a good 420 week.
Likewise, Jay. Thank you so much. And folks out there, if you're in New York on the Upper West Side, check out Flower Power on 66 between Columbus and Central Park West. And we're at platformcanna.com. And Jay, thanks again for having us.
We'll put a link on how to get in touch with you. Stay on for 2 seconds while we wrap the show. I, of course, am Jay Rosenthal. This has been Cultivated Live. Encourage you to subscribe to our daily news at cultivated.news. Follow us on LinkedIn. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. We'll be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on LinkedIn and YouTube, with the crew from New Hampshire, talking about what the state Senate might do, what the governor might do. It'll be an informed and timely conversation. And remember, as these guys said, buy cannabis at your local dispensary.